In this video, I'm going to talk about the perfect time to launch your app. And what I mean by that is, when do you know when your app is ready to launch? So I don't necessarily mean like the perfect time of year or the perfect day. I just mean, when is your app in a good enough space to launch? So if you haven't already heard, I recently launched an app called Rhodes, and you can learn more about the app at rhodesaudio.com, but I'll be kind of using the app as a case study for examples while discussing this launch time and essentially giving you my experience with launching that app. First of all, I feel like it's a pretty common thing to hear about launching fast, and that's great, but you also need to have enough of an MVP to launch. What this video is about is when to know that you have an MVP, which is that minimum viable product. So really, it's when is it viable enough? When is there enough there that you can launch it and start getting valuable feedback? Now, in the case of my app, I think I actually, in some ways, launched too late for some features, and then in other features, kind of launched a little bit too early. So let me break that down a little bit. Kind of what I mean is, I had features in the first version of this app that didn't necessarily need to be there, and I could have launched earlier without those features. Those features would be the notifications and the share links. So these are core aspects of the app, but notifications, for instance, you don't need to have in your first version of your app. Now, for me, I made the decision to actually include notifications because I kind of did think that they were a viable piece of that minimum viable product. And the reason for that is the Rhodes app is actually somewhat of a conversational app. So someone might record a piece of audio and then they're waiting for a response from someone else. And without that notification, they would just have to go back to the app and just keep checking it, which of course is not a great user experience. However, the app still could have launched without it, and then I could have worked on that while the app was already launched. Notifications on iOS at least are opt-in, so you don't get notifications by default. You have to turn on notifications and accept them. And I have noticed that most of the iOS users have not actually done that, so furthering that this feature was kind of added too early is that it's not even really fully used. Overall, I don't regret having them in there. I was going to add them eventually anyway, but it is something that slowed down that initial launch. The other thing is kind of similar. It's kind of a channel invite, which basically replace someone texting their friend manually and saying, hey, go download this app, and then I'll add you as a friend. Instead, they can just send them the link and then they kind of get added automatically. It has been used, which is great, and the use of that has actually led to a good bit of growth in the app, but yes, it definitely didn't need to be something that delayed the launch. Now let me kind of talk about the other side of that, which is features that maybe weren't included in my initial launch that probably should have been. Ultimately, the answer to that is none. I think the launch was fine, and if anything, I launched too late. But in retrospect, I wish I focused more on the actual audio player and the commenting system. So I guess what I've learned from that, or what I'm realizing from that, is that when you are looking at launching your app and thinking about your minimum viable product for your app, you really want to think about what is your core feature. For example, notifications are not a core feature of my app, but I spent maybe 2 weeks to a month working on notifications, whereas I could have spent that time making the core feature of my app, which is the player and the commenting system, be better. Now, that leads to another thing, which is getting that user feedback does lead you to see what actually is missing or what needs to be better. You need to get the app to a point where it's at least stable and there's not a lot of bugs. It's never going to be early enough, and it's always going to be too late. Launching too early is never really going to be a huge issue, I don't think. Let's say in Rhodes, I had almost no features. Let's say you could just record audio and listen to it back, and that was it. So there's no friend features, there's no social features, there's no commenting system. In my mind, that's way too early. However, if I launched that app at that stage, it wouldn't have really been a big deal, because as long as there wasn't a huge marketing effort or huge launch around it, which I think is going to be the case around most indie developer apps that are launched. You kind of launch it, post on your social media, and that's kind of it in the beginning. So before you even go into that whole marketing stage, you could launch the app. So if I launched it with a simple feature, which would basically just be a simple audio recorder, some people might use the app for the audio recording feature, but more importantly, you might get some users that start giving you ideas and feedback and all that stuff. So it is important to kind of get that feedback. And then if you just keep iterating and updating it weekly or monthly, you can get to the point where you actually have something that's an app that you were trying to build. So let's say, for example, I deployed the simple recording feature in January. Then maybe it takes me another month to add the friending feature. Now the app could be just simple recording, but you can listen to other people's recordings. All along the way, maybe new users are getting brought in. And then a month after that, maybe I add the commenting feature, and now more users are getting brought in. And then eventually I add the notifications. And ultimately, let's say by June, it becomes the app that you waited to launch, and all the features are kind of the same. Ultimately, it's the same thing, but the only benefit is that you maybe have new users. One thing that I hear a lot, and I think of as well, people are kind of afraid to deploy something that isn't fully done. I'm definitely like that. I don't like to deploy stuff that is, broken or isn't kind of to the level that I want it. You're probably better off deploying it when you get something that is at least good enough, because you can start getting users and start getting feedback. I think it is a different situation if you do have a plan for marketing your app and a plan for getting users, and maybe you already have those channels kind of locked down. And if that's the case, then I think maybe you should wait a little bit longer and get that app to that, for example, that 6-month level where it is more fleshed out and you do have more of those features. Let's say, for example, you have an email list with 100,000 people, and let's say all these people are kind of in the niche of the app you're building. Then these are all 100,000 people potentially would be like actual users of your app. If you deploy that example, like simple audio recorder, they maybe are going to see that and be like, okay, this is dumb. I already have this app on my phone. In that case, if you have a large audience that you're able to market to directly, then you do want kind of a better app that has the unique features when you do launch to them. However, you don't need to send that email as soon as you launch the app. So you could still do the incremental deploys, and then once it gets to a place that's pretty good, then you can send it out to that marketing channel. That is exactly what I'm doing, although not with that marketing channel, but instead with like Product Hunt and some other marketing efforts. Right now, I'm kind of doing my social media marketing efforts for the app, but I'm not doing like a full force marketing yet, because I still don't think the app is to the level where I want it to be, at least. That is maybe a controversial thing. Some people are maybe more like, yeah, do all marketing, get the marketing plan going and all of that. But of course, I'm more of a developer, so for me, it's all more about the features and getting the app to what I want it to be. I will talk later about the marketing efforts once I do start doing those more full force, and once the app is more to that level where I'm marketing it more on a strategic level, I will say. So yeah, if you want to learn more about the marketing efforts I will be doing, I will be talking about that in the future, so go ahead and subscribe to get updated with those videos. Ultimately, of course, like most stuff, it does depend. Sorry that I don't really have a definitive answer for when to deploy your app, but for me at least, I feel like getting something out there that is working, that is at least pushing towards the vision of what you actually have for your app as soon as possible is the best thing. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Comment down below if you have any questions. See you in the next one.